The rain lashed down in relentless sheets, each drop a cold dagger slicing through the dense canopy of the forest. Thunder rumbled ominously overhead, shaking the towering evergreens that crowded the narrow footpath like silent sentinels guarding some terrible secret. Navy SEAL Jack Carr moved cautiously, every step measured on the slick, root-choked ground. The storm had come on fast, turning the quiet wilderness into a chaotic symphony of wind, water, and shadow. Jack's breath came in shallow puffs, his dark eyes scanning the blackened undergrowth. He was no stranger to danger, but tonight something felt off. A tension beneath the storm's fury that prickled his skin with unease. His military instincts, honed by years of covert operations and firefights, kept him alert. He was alone, miles from the nearest road, with only the distant howl of the storm and the steady beat of rain on leaves for company. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Suddenly, a sharp, desperate sound cut through the night. A baby's cry. Fragile, raw, and unmistakably human. Jack froze, his heart pounding. The wail was coming from just off the trail, somewhere deeper in the woods. Without hesitation, he pushed through the tangled brush, branches whipping his face, mud slick beneath his boots. The cry grew louder, more frantic, echoing in the storm like a beacon of vulnerability. Then he saw her. Tied to a gnarled tree trunk with rough, fraying rope, a tiny newborn girl, no more than a few days old, was curled in on herself, soaked and shivering. Her dark hair clung to her pale forehead, and her wide eyes, bright and terrified, searched the gloom for shelter. The baby's fragile chest heaved with each sob, her tiny fists punching at the air as if trying to fight the storm itself. Jack's breath caught. Instinct took over, a soldier's heart beneath a hardened exterior, softened by the sight of this helpless life. Kneeling swiftly beside her, he reached out with gloved hands, gently working the knots loose despite the rain's assault. The ropes bit into his fingers, but he didn't flinch. Time was a luxury they didn't have. As the final knot gave way, Jack scooped the infant into his arms, cradling her close against his chest. The warmth of her tiny body was a stark contrast to the cold rain, and he felt an unexpected swell of protectiveness wash over him. The baby's crying slowed, her gaze locking onto his with a fragile trust that seemed almost miraculous amid the storm's fury. "This is going to be okay, little one," Jack whispered, his voice low and steady. "I've got you." The forest around them seemed to hold its breath as the storm howled on. But inside Jack's jacket, wrapped in the thin layer of his tactical shirt, the baby found a fragile sanctuary. Jack shifted, carefully, using his body heat to shield her from the relentless cold and wind. His mind raced. Who would leave a newborn abandoned in the wilderness like this? And why? Heavy raindrops pelted his face as he scanned the shadowy tree line, searching for any sign of danger or explanation. The storm showed no mercy, lightning flashing to illuminate the twisted branches and soaked foliage in stark white bursts. But no one else stirred. It was as if the forest itself was holding its secrets tight. Jack's military training kicked in fully now. He needed shelter, warmth, and a plan. The baby's fragile whimpers were a constant reminder of the stakes. This was no ordinary rescue. Somewhere out there, someone had chosen to abandon this child in the merciless wild. The wind tugged at his jacket as he rose, determination hardening in his gaze. With one arm securing the infant close to his chest, Jack began moving again, stepping more confidently through the mud and debris. His boots sank into puddles, the cold creeping up his legs. but he ignored the discomfort. Survival was no longer just about him. It was about the small life fragile enough to be crushed by a single misstep. As he walked, Jack's mind flickered back to his own family. The memories of quiet nights at home, the faces of those he loved. It was those memories that fueled his resolve, anchoring him against the storm's madness. He wasn't just a warrior anymore. He was a guardian. And this child was now his responsibility. The forest around him was a blur of dark greens and grays, the rain blurring the edges of reality. Branches snapped underfoot, and the distant roll of thunder seemed to chase him onward. Jack's movements were swift but careful, his senses sharpened to every sound. The baby's small fingers curled weakly around his jacket, her eyes fluttering as exhaustion began to claim her. Finding shelter was a race against time. The storm showed no signs of abating, and the chill was seeping into the infant's bones. Jack spotted a rocky outcrop ahead, a natural alcove formed by moss-covered stones and twisted roots. It wasn't much, but it would provide relief from the wind and rain. He settled the baby gently on a bed of dry leaves he quickly gathered, wrapping her tightly in his jacket to keep her warm. Pulling out a small survival blanket from his pack, Jack draped it over them both, creating a fragile cocoon of warmth against the storm's fury. Jack's hands moved methodically, checking the baby's pulse, her breathing. She was cold, but alive, a fragile ember flickering against the darkness. His military training told him that every second counted. Hypothermia could claim her quickly if he didn't act fast. He whispered reassurances, a quiet lullaby of calm in the howling chaos. "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." The rain softened to a steady patter, and the thunder's growl receded into distant rumbles. But Jack knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, answers awaited, and so did danger. For now, though, he sat in the shelter of the outcrop, holding the baby close, shielding her from the storm and the world's harshness. The forest around them remained wild and unforgiving. But in that small clearing, beneath the angry sky, a bond was forged. Between a battle-hardened seal and an abandoned child, both fighting for survival against impossible odds. The rain had eased into a gentle drizzle by morning, the relentless storm giving way to a muted gray sky that hung low over the towering pines of Olympic National Park. Mist curled around the wet branches, weaving through the dense forest like ghostly fingers reaching for the earth. Jack Carr sat quietly in the natural alcove beneath the rocky outcrop, his breath steady despite the cold that still clung to the air. The newborn girl nestled against his chest was wrapped securely in his jacket and the survival blanket, her fragile warmth a small but powerful defiance against the damp chill. Jack's gaze drifted upward, taking in the rain-soaked canopy that filtered the pale morning light. The forest was alive with quiet sounds, the drip of water from leaves, the distant call of a raven, the soft rustle of fallen needles under unseen creatures. Here, in the vast wilderness, nature held both beauty and peril in equal measure. The scent of wet earth mingled with pine resin, a pungent reminder of the untamed world he had stepped into. For a man who had spent years navigating hostile territories and covert missions, this wild expanse was different. It offered no clear objectives, no enemy to engage, only the quiet challenge of survival and the unexpected burden of protecting a life so fragile. Jack's weathered features softened as he felt the baby stir, her tiny fingers brushing against his skin. Despite the weight of his own weariness, a fierce resolve burned within him. He had come here seeking peace, a brief respite from the chaos of deployments and combat. The dense forests near the park's border had promised solitude, a chance to reconnect with the simple rhythms of the natural world. But the discovery of the infant had shattered that hope, replacing it with a mission far more urgent and deeply personal. The baby's vulnerability stood in stark contrast to the rugged environment. Her pale skin, damp and flushed from the cold, was a reminder of the innocence that could so easily be lost amid the wilderness's indifferent grip. Jack's trained eyes scanned her for signs of injury or illness, relief washing over him when he found none beyond mild hypothermia. Still, the urgency to find help gnawed at him. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, a labyrinth of moss-covered trunks, fern-lined trails, and shadowed clearings. Jack knew the terrain well enough to navigate, but the storm had likely washed out some paths, and the thick undergrowth slowed his progress. Adjusted the strap of his pack, which contained only the essentials: medical supplies, survival gear, and a compact radio he had hoped to use if he found a signal. He rose carefully, the baby cradled in one arm, and began moving toward a faint trail that led deeper into the park. Each step was deliberate, mindful of the slippery roots and uneven ground. The rain-soaked leaves glistened underfoot, and the mist wove through the branches like a living veil. Jack's senses were alert to every sound: the crunch of his boots, the distant splash of a stream, the whisper of wind through the needles. As he walked, the memories of his recent deployments flickered through his mind. The adrenaline-fueled precision of missions in hostile countries, the camaraderie of brothers in arms, and the sharp sting of loss. Yet here, in this vast wilderness, those distant battles felt both immediate and strangely irrelevant. His fight was now for the life in his arms, a life that depended entirely on his strength and judgment. The baby's cries had quieted, replaced by soft coos and the gentle rise and fall of sleep. Jack whispered soothing words, his voice low and steady, a thread of comfort in the vast silence. "We'll find help soon. Hang in there, little one." The trail led them to a narrow creek, its waters swollen from the storm, rushing over smooth stones with a ceaseless murmur. Jack knelt to cup water in his hands, wetting a cloth to gently clean the baby's dirt-smudged face. The cold water sent a shiver through her tiny body, but she didn't protest. Jack's hands were steady and sure, the tenderness in his touch belying the hardened warrior within. Nearby, an old ranger's cabin came into view, nestled among towering firs and shielded by thick underbrush. Its weathered wood siding was streaked with moss and rain, and thin wisps of smoke curled from the chimney into the damp sky. Jack's heart lifted at the sight, a beacon of civilization in the wilderness. He approached cautiously, the baby still secure in his arms, knocked firmly on the door. Moments later, it creaked open to reveal a woman in her late 30s, her sharp eyes framed by strands of damp hair, wearing a worn ranger's uniform. Mara Ellis, a local park ranger, took in the soaked figure before her and the infant swaddled against his chest. "Jack Carr." He introduced himself quietly, recognizing the familiar face from the park's ranger posts. "I found her last night, abandoned in the woods. She needs help." Mara's expression shifted from surprise to concern. She took in the baby's pale complexion and trembling form. "Come inside," she said, stepping aside. "You did good bringing her here." Inside, the cabin was warm and sparse, filled with the scent of pine wood and wood smoke. Mara moved efficiently, fetching a blanket and a hot cup of tea, while Jack settled the infant into a makeshift bed lined with soft cloth. The baby's eyes fluttered, open, meeting Mara's gaze with a curious innocence that seemed out of place in this harsh world. Mara sat across from Jack, her eyes searching his face. "This baby? Do you know how she ended up out there?" Jack shook his head, his jaw tight. "No clue. Whoever left her didn't want her found." It's not just abandonment. It feels deliberate. I'm worried she's in danger. Mara nodded slowly, her brows furrowing with unease. There's been talk of missing children around here lately. Local reports, but nothing concrete. This might be connected. Jack's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle he hadn't yet seen fully. The forest, the storm, the abandoned infant, all threads in a web far larger than a simple rescue mission. But for now, his focus remained clear. Protect the child, find answers, and keep moving forward. Outside, the rain had finally ceased, leaving the forest glistening under the muted light. Through the cabin window, the towering pines stood silent and watchful, bearing witness to the beginning of a story that would test the limits of courage and compassion. Jack sat back, exhaustion settling into his bones, but his resolve was unbroken. Here, in the heart of the wilderness, a new mission had begun, one that would demand every ounce of his skill, heart, and determination. And as the baby slept peacefully, oblivious to the storm she had survived, Jack knew that whatever lay ahead, he would face it head-on. The cabin's worn wooden walls seemed to close in around Jack as he worked swiftly, his fingers steady despite the weight of exhaustion pressing against his body. The baby lay swaddled on a makeshift cot, her pale skin still flushed from the cold, her tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Outside, the forest remained quiet, the storm having finally relented. But inside, urgency filled the air. Jack's military training kicked in with precision. He unpacked the compact trauma kit from his bag, its contents laid out with practiced care. Sterile gauze, antiseptic wipes, a small bottle of saline solution, and a compact heating pad. His eyes flicked over the baby's delicate form, searching for any sign of injury beyond the obvious hypothermia. Though she had no visible wounds, the cold had sapped her strength. And Jack knew that without immediate care, her fragile body could succumb. He gently cleaned the tiny hands and face with the saline-soaked cloth, careful not to startle her. The baby's lips parted in a faint whimper, her dark eyes fluttering open briefly before closing again. Jack whispered soothing words, his voice low and steady, a lifeline in the sterile cabin. "Almost there, kid. You're tough." Mara Ellis stood nearby, watching with a mix of relief and concern. Her years as a park ranger had taught her to value patience in moments like this, but she could see the tension in Jack's shoulders, the urgency in his gaze. "You handled this well," she said quietly. "Most people wouldn't know where to start." Jack offered a small, tired smile. "Training helps, but she's the real fighter." He wrapped the heating pad carefully around the baby's torso, adjusting the blanket to trap warmth without risking overheating. The cabin's small wood stove crackled softly, casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls. The room smelled faintly of pine smoke and antiseptic, a strange combination that somehow grounded Jack in the present. Minutes stretched into an hour as Jack monitored the infant's condition, checking her temperature, pulse, and breathing with meticulous care. The baby's crying subsided, replaced by soft whimpers and occasional coos, signs that the warmth was beginning to take effect. Jack's eyes, sharp and watchful, caught every subtle change. His mind raced through his limited medical knowledge. First aid courses, field medevac protocols, survival training. He knew that hypothermia in newborns could be fatal if not treated quickly. But with each passing moment, the baby seemed to regain strength. Her fingers twitched, her tiny fists curled and unclenched, a fragile rhythm of life asserting itself. Mara moved to the small kitchenette, preparing a warm bottle of formula she found in the cabin supplies. The baby's cries had quieted, but hunger was sure to follow. Jack watched as Mara returned, the bottle cradled carefully in her hands. "Let's see if she's ready," Mara said gently. Jack lifted the infant, her small head resting against his forearm as he guided the bottle to her lips. The baby latched instinctively, sucking weakly but steadily. Relief flooded Jack's chest, a small victory in the midst of uncertainty. As the baby fed, Jack's thoughts drifted to the wider implications of their discovery. This was no chance abandonment. Someone had deliberately left her here in the heart of the wilderness, exposed to the elements and unknown dangers. The questions gnawed at him. Who was she? Why was she left behind? And who might come looking for her? He glanced at Mara, who met his gaze with a grim understanding. "We need to find out what's going on," she said. "If this baby was abandoned, there might be others, and it could be linked to something bigger." Jack nodded, the weight of responsibility settling heavier on his shoulders. "First, we stabilize her. Then we start asking questions." The baby finished the bottle, her tiny body relaxing against Jack's chest. He hummed softly, a lullaby of his own making, as Mara prepared a clean diaper and fresh clothes from the cabin's modest supply. Jack's hands were gentle but efficient, changing and dressing the infant with a tenderness that surprised even him. Outside, the sky began to brighten, shafts of pale sunlight piercing the mist that clung to the forest floor. The storm's aftermath had transformed the woods into a damp, shimmering landscape, alive with the scent of rain and earth. But inside the cabin, the world had contracted to a small, fragile life, and the man determined to protect it. Jack settled back into a wooden chair, the baby cradled in his arms, her warmth a balm against the chill that still lingered in his bones. His mind was clear, focused on the task at hand, but beneath the surface, a storm of questions and doubts churned. He thought of his own family, the quiet evenings and laughter that seemed a world away from this isolated cabin. The contrast between his past and present was stark, yet the sense of duty remained constant. Protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, that was what he was trained to do. And now, that duty extended to this tiny life, fragile yet unyielding. Mara moved to the radio, fiddling with the dials in hopes of catching a signal. The static crackled, but no clear voice emerged. "No luck yet," she reported, frustration evident. "We'll have to rely on the park rangers out here. Someone will come looking." Jack nodded. "We need to keep her safe until then." He looked down at the baby, her dark eyes half open, studying him with a quiet curiosity that seemed beyond her days. In that gaze, Jack found a spark of hope, something pure and unbreakable amid the uncertainty. Time seemed to blur as Jack maintained his vigil, the hours folding into one another. He cleaned the infant's face again, checked her breathing, adjusted the blanket around her. Each movement was deliberate, a ritual of care that anchored him in this unexpected role. The baby's small fingers curled around his thumb, a gesture so simple yet profound that Jack's chest tightened. In that moment, the harsh wilderness beyond the cabin walls faded away, replaced by a fragile bond forged in adversity. Jack whispered once more, his voice a promise carried on the soft breeze that slipped through a cracked window. "We're going to get through this. Together." As the morning light deepened, the world outside began to stir. The calls of birds, the rustle of leaves, the distant footsteps of those who might come with answers. But inside the cabin, time held still, marked only by the steady rhythm of a newborn's breath and the unwavering watch of a soldier turned guardian. Jack knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with danger. But for now, in this quiet moment of care and connection, survival was their shared mission. and hope their strongest weapon. The forest outside the ranger's cabin was shrouded in early morning fog, soft tendrils weaving through the towering evergreens and blanketing the undergrowth in a ghostly haze. Jack Carr tightened his jacket against the lingering chill, the infant securely bundled against his chest. The baby's breathing was steady now, a quiet rhythm that gave him a fragile sense of hope. But as the mist clung to the trees, so too did the weight of uncertainty settle deeper into Jack's mind. He had hoped that from here, help would be close, either a ranger patrol or a nearby search party. But as the hours stretched on, the isolation pressed in with unrelenting force. The storm had cut off access routes, washed out trails, and left the park in a state of disarray. Even the radio in the cabin had failed to pick up a clear signal, leaving Jack and Mara reliant on old-fashioned foot patrols and word of mouth. Jack's jaw tightened as he scanned the tree line, the fog swallowing the path ahead like a living wall. The baby stirred, her small fists twitching, and he murmured a soft reassurance. "Hang on, little one. We're going to find help." They had set out before dawn, choosing a narrow game trail Mara knew well. The path was slick with mud and littered with broken branches, remnants of the storm's fury. Jack's booted feet sank deeply into the earth with each step, and the baby's weight against his chest was both comforting and a constant reminder of his duty. Mara led the way, her sharp eyes cutting through the mist as she scanned for signs of recent activity or any clues that might explain the baby's abandonment. "There's been reports of strange vehicles near the park's eastern boundary," she said quietly. "Unmarked trucks, people moving around at odd hours. No official word yet, but locals have seen them." Jack nodded grimly. "Sounds like we're walking into something bigger than a lost child." The forest closed in around them, the canopy thickening to block out much of the pale light. Birdsong was sparse, replaced by the occasional snap of twigs underfoot and the distant gurgle of a swollen creek. Jack's senses were alert, every muscle taut with readiness. The baby remained calm in his arms, soothed by his steady heartbeat and the rhythm of his steps. As they pressed deeper into the wilderness, Jack's mind churned with the challenges ahead. The terrain was unforgiving. Steep slopes, tangled roots, and hidden ravines threatened to trip even the most experienced hiker. Carrying the baby added a layer of complexity, forcing him to move deliberately and cautiously. Fatigue gnawed at his limbs, but retreat was not an option. Hours passed in a tense silence, broken only by Mara's occasional updates and the baby's soft coos. Jack's thoughts drifted to the possibility of other victims. If this child had been deliberately abandoned, were there more? Was this the work of a larger criminal enterprise? The questions loomed like shadows behind every tree. At one point, the trail forked sharply, and Mara paused, consulting a worn map with a furrowed brow. "If we take the left path, it leads to an old ranger station that's been out of use for a while," she explained. "It might have a radio or at least better shelter." Jack agreed without hesitation. "We need to get her somewhere safer, somewhere we can call for backup." The detour added time and treacherous footing, the path narrowing to a single track bordered by brambles and moss-covered stones. Jack's hands clenched the straps of his pack as he navigated the uneven ground, the baby's warmth a small beacon against the damp cold. His muscles ached, but the determination in his eyes never wavered. Suddenly, a faint noise drifted through the trees. A distant vehicle engine, low and rough, grinding against the quiet forest. Jack froze, instincts flaring. The sound wasn't consistent with the usual park patrol trucks. It was heavier, more menacing. Mara's hand shot to her belt, fingers tightening around a utility knife. "That's not good," she muttered. Could be those trucks the locals mentioned. Jack's grip on the baby tightened instinctively, his gaze darting through the fog. We need to move off the trail now. They veered silently into the thicket, branches scraping against their jackets as they pressed deeper into the undergrowth. The baby stirred, her small cries muffled by Jack's steady heartbeat. The engine noise grew louder, accompanied by the crunch of tires on gravel. Jack's mind raced. The forest was vast, but the presence of vehicles meant people, possibly dangerous ones, were nearby. He scanned for a vantage point, spotting a fallen log partially obscured by ferns and moss. He lowered himself and Mara down quietly, keeping the baby shielded against his chest. Through the dense foliage, Jack spotted two large unmarked trucks parked near a dirt clearing, their engines idling. Men in dark clothing moved around the vehicles, their faces obscured by hoods and scarves. They spoke in low, harsh voices, their movements sharp and purposeful. Jack's heart pounded. The scene confirmed his worst fears. This was no random abandonment. The baby was caught in the middle of something far darker, something that reached beyond the forest's borders. Mara whispered beside him, her eyes fierce. We have to warn the others, and fast. Jack nodded, his gaze never leaving the men. We'll circle back, find help, and come back for her. But we need a plan. The baby stirred again, sensing the tension in the air. Jack's voice softened as he cradled her closer. Stay quiet, kid. We're not done yet. As the sun climbed higher, breaking through the fog in scattered beams, Jack and Mara made their way back along the treacherous trail, every step measured and silent. The forest that had once seemed a refuge now felt like a trap, its shadows hiding threats that lurked just beyond sight. The journey was exhausting, each mile a test of endurance and will. Jack's muscles burned, but the fragile life in his arms drove him onward. The need to find help, to uncover the truth behind the baby's abandonment, was a mission that eclipsed even his own fatigue. By late afternoon, they reached a ranger outpost where a small team was gathered, men and women who had been alerted by Mara's earlier messages. Jack handed over the baby to a medic, watching as she was wrapped in fresh blankets and tended to with professional care. But even as relief washed over him, Jack's mind remained sharp, aware that this was only the beginning. The forest had revealed a glimpse of a darker web, and the path ahead was fraught with danger. For now, though, the baby was safe, and Jack Carr was ready to face whatever came next to protect her and uncover the truth hidden beneath the towering pines. The quiet hum of fluorescent lights filled the sterile confines of the small medical tent pitched at the ranger station's perimeter. Outside, the thick forest stood silent, its towering pines casting long shadows in the waning afternoon sun. Inside, Jack Carr sat stiffly on a folding chair, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on his broad shoulders, but his eyes remained sharp, scanning every detail in the room. The baby, now wrapped snugly in a soft blanket, lay in a nearby incubator, her tiny chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Jack's gaze never left her. The fragility of her form was a stark contrast to the hardened soldier he had become, yet beneath his rugged exterior, a fierce protectiveness had taken root. Hours had passed since Mara Ellis and the ranger team had taken over care, providing warmth, nourishment, and medical attention. The baby's color had improved, and her cries had softened to gentle murmurs. But Jack knew this was only the beginning. The real battle was yet to come. As the medic adjusted the incubator's temperature and checked the infant's vitals, Jack's mind drifted back through the events that had brought him here. The storm, the discovery, the desperate trek through the wilderness. Each step had been a test of endurance and willpower, But now, in this moment of calm, the weight of responsibility settled heavier than ever. He found himself whispering reassurances to the sleeping child. Words meant more for himself than for her. "You're safe now. I'm not letting anyone hurt you." Mara entered quietly, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. She pulled up a chair beside Jack, folding her hands in her lap. "She's stable," she said softly, "but we need to keep her warm and fed. Hypothermia takes time to fully reverse, especially in newborns." Jack nodded, rubbing a hand over his stubbled chin. "What about getting her out of here? We can't stay in the middle of the forest forever." Mara's eyes darkened. "We need to find her family, or whoever was responsible for leaving her. There are signs this isn't an isolated incident." Jack's jaw tightened. "You think this is connected to something bigger?" "There have been reports," Mara explained, "of missing children in nearby towns. Small, scattered incidents that don't add up. I feared it might be human trafficking or worse, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions." Jack's military instincts flared. "Then we're dealing with a network. This baby's abandonment is just the surface." Mara looked at him, a flicker of determination in her gaze. "We need help from the authorities. FBI, local police, whoever can coordinate a proper investigation. But until then, we protect her." Jack glanced toward the incubator, the baby's tiny fingers curling in sleep. The thought of the darkness surrounding her past fueled a fire within him. He had faced enemies that sought to destroy freedom and innocence. But this was personal. The medic returned with a warm bottle of formula, setting it gently beside the incubator. "She'll need nourishment soon," the woman said, smiling softly. "She's a fighter." Jack's eyes softened. "That she is." As the sun dipped lower, casting a golden haze through the tent's open flaps, Jack found himself lost in thought. Memories of his family flooded back, their faces, their laughter, the promises he had made to protect them. Now, that promise extended beyond blood, to a child he had barely known for a day. The bond between them was silent but unbreakable, forged in shared survival and unwavering resolve. Jack whispered again, a vow carried on the gentle breeze that stirred the tent's edges. "I'll find out who did this, and I'll make sure she's safe." Mara leaned closer, her voice low but resolute. "You're not alone in this. We'll uncover the truth together." Outside, the forest breathed quietly, the towering trees standing watch as shadows lengthened and night crept in. Within the tent, a man and a child faced the unknown, united by hope, courage, and the unyielding power of determination. Jack's fingers brushed the baby's soft hair, his heart steady despite the storm that awaited beyond the forest's edge. The mission was clear: protect the innocent, expose the darkness, and fight with everything he had. And so, as the night settled over Olympic National Park, a battle-hardened SEAL found a new purpose. One defined not by war, but by the fragile light of life he vowed to protect. Dawn broke over Olympic National Park with a pale light that filtered softly through the dense canopy, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The medical tent, once a refuge of warmth and quiet urgency, now hummed with renewed activity. Jack Carr stood near the incubator, watching the infant as she stirred gently, her dark eyes opening briefly to meet his steady gaze. The night had passed with few disturbances, the baby's condition slowly improving under the watchful care of the medics. But the questions that haunted Jack's mind remained unanswered, pressing heavier with each hour. Whoever had left this child in the wilderness had done so with intent, and uncovering that intent was now paramount. Just then, The tent flap rustled open, and Mara Ellis stepped inside, her expression serious but hopeful. In her hands was a tablet, its screen glowing softly with information. "I managed to get through to the local ranger station," she said, moving closer. "They've been tracking recent reports of missing children in the area. One disappearance matches the baby's description." Jack's eyes narrowed, a surge of hope mingling with caution. "Tell me everything." Mara tapped the screen, bringing up a digital map dotted with markers. A little girl named Emily was reported missing from a small town just outside the park's eastern boundary 3 days ago. She's about the same age as our baby, and the timeline fits. Jack absorbed the information, the pieces beginning to align in his mind. "So she's Emily." Mara nodded. "More than that, the report mentioned suspicious activity near the town. Unmarked vehicles, strangers asking questions, people moving at odd hours. It's possible Emily was taken and then left here." A cold knot tightened in Jack's stomach. The idea that the baby was not just lost, but part of a larger, darker scheme sent a chill deeper than the morning air. "Have the authorities been notified?" Jack asked. "Yes," Mara replied. "FBI agents are en route, coordinating with local law enforcement. They're taking the report seriously now." Jack's jaw clenched. "Good. But until they arrive, we need to keep Emily safe, and we need to find out who's behind this." As Mara spoke, the tent's radio crackled to life. A voice came through, crackling and urgent. "This is Agent Lena Thorne with the FBI. We're on site and ready to coordinate. Please advise your current status." Jack moved quickly, picking up the handset. "Agent Thorne, this is Jack Carr. We have the child in custody and are stabilizing her. We're preparing for your arrival and have information on potential trafficking activity linked to this case." The voice on the radio was steady, professional. "Understood, Jack. We'll be there shortly. Coordinate with Ranger Ellis for further details." Jack handed the radio back to Mara, who nodded in acknowledgement. The wheels of a coordinated response were beginning to turn. Later that morning, the Forest Ranger Station was a hub of controlled chaos. Agents in plain clothes moved purposefully between vehicles and command tents, poring over maps and reports. Jack found himself alongside Mara and Agent Lena Thorne, a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded him of his own military mentors. "I've reviewed the initial reports," Lena said, her voice calm but firm. "This is more than a kidnapping. We're looking at a human trafficking ring operating in the region. Emily's case is just one piece." Jack's gaze hardened. "What's the scope? How many others?" "Still gathering intel," Lena replied. "But the pattern suggests multiple victims, possibly moved through remote areas like this to avoid detection." Mara added, "Local sightings support that. Unmarked vehicles, suspicious campsites, strange people moving under cover of darkness." Jack's mind raced, the urgency mounting. "We need to act fast. The forest is vast, and these traffickers know how to disappear." Lena nodded. "We have teams mobilizing for search and rescue, but we'll need your expertise on the ground. Your knowledge of the terrain and survival skills are invaluable." Jack felt the familiar surge of purpose returning. "I'm ready." As the day unfolded, plans were set into motion. Jack and Mara briefed the search teams, sharing insights on possible routes and hiding spots. Emily, now resting comfortably under medical care, was shielded from the growing storm of activity. Between briefings, Jack found a moment to sit beside the incubator. The baby's dark eyes met his, a silent connection bridging the gap between innocence and experience. He whispered softly, "We're going to find the others. We're going to stop this." Outside the station, The forest stood tall and indifferent, its secrets hidden beneath layers of moss and shadow. But within the ranger station's walls, a new alliance had formed. Soldiers, rangers, and federal agents united by a common mission. As night fell again, Jack prepared for the days ahead, steeling himself for the battles that would come. The path was uncertain, fraught with danger. But he was no stranger to the unknown. And with Emily's fragile life in his hands, failure was not an option. The sky was a slate-gray tapestry stretching over the dense forest as Jack Carr and Mara Ellis moved silently through a narrow game trail, the damp earth muffling their footsteps. The early morning mist clung to the ferns, weaving between the towering evergreens like a living shroud. Jack's grip on his rifle was steady, eyes sharp beneath the brim of his weathered cap. The baby, Emily, now nestled in a specially designed carrier strapped securely to his chest, slept peacefully, oblivious to the growing storm around them. Their mission had shifted, no longer just a desperate search for a missing child, but a calculated pursuit of a ruthless criminal network operating in the shadows of the Pacific Northwest. Intelligence gathered by Agent Lena Thorne had painted a grim picture. A trafficking ring exploiting the region's vast wilderness to move victims unseen, hidden within the labyrinth of forest and mountains. Jack's military training guided every step. He moved with purposeful stealth, scanning for signs, a broken twig, a discarded wrapper, tire tracks partially concealed by rain. Mara followed close, her ranger's expertise invaluable in reading the subtle clues nature left behind. The forest was alive, but so were the predators they hunted. "We're close," Mara whispered, her voice barely more than the rustle of leaves. "There's been recent activity near this ridge. Campsites, fires. They're using this area as a waypoint." Jack nodded, tightening the straps on Emily's carrier. Every detail mattered. The baby's safety was paramount, but so was stopping those who had torn her from safety in the first place. As they crested the ridge, the forest opened into a hidden clearing, partially concealed by dense underbrush and a fallen canopy of trees. The remnants of a makeshift camp lay scattered, smoldering ashes, discarded food containers, and a rough tarp tied between two pines. Footprints pressed deep in the muddy soil told a story of hurried departures, but signs of recent presence were unmistakable. Jack crouched low, his eyes narrowing. "They've been here within the last 24 hours. Mara scanned the perimeter, noting a narrow trail leading deeper into the woods. "They're moving again, but where?" Jack's gaze hardened. "We follow." The path twisted through the forest, growing steeper and more treacherous. Jack's boots slipped on wet rocks, but his resolve never faltered. The forest canopy thickened, muffling sound and light, creating an eerie cathedral of green and shadow. Suddenly, voices broke the silence. Low, harsh whispers carried on the damp air. Jack signaled Mara to halt, pressing himself against a moss-covered boulder as the sounds grew closer. Peering through the undergrowth, they spotted two men unloading crates from an unmarked van parked near a concealed dirt road. The men moved with practiced efficiency, their faces obscured by scarves and hoods. Jack's pulse quickened. These were the traffickers, the faceless predators who had torn Emily from her home and left her to the mercy of strangers in the wilderness. His grip on the rifle tightened as he weighed their options. "We can't risk a firefight here," Mara whispered. "Too exposed. But we need to know more." Jack nodded slowly. "We observe, gather intel, find their route and numbers." They settled into the shadows, watching as additional vehicles arrived, more men unloading supplies, setting up temporary shelters. The camp was larger than they had anticipated, a hub in the network's operation. Jack's mind raced. The traffickers were organized, well-armed, and familiar with the terrain. It was a war of attrition, and every advantage counted. As dusk approached, Jack and Mara retreated silently, mapping the route back to the ranger station. The baby stirred against Jack's chest, her tiny fingers curling around his jacket. Despite the danger, she remained a beacon of innocence and hope. Back at the station, Jack debriefed Agent Thorne and the assembled teams. The information was vital. The traffickers' patterns, their supply lines, their numbers. Plans were drawn to cut off escape routes and coordinate simultaneous raids. But Jack knew the real challenge was ahead. The criminal ring was not just a shadow in the forest. It was a sprawling operation that thrived on fear and secrecy. To dismantle it, they would need precision, courage, and unyielding resolve. That night, as the forest whispered outside the station's walls, Jack sat alone with Emily sleeping peacefully beside him. The weight of the mission pressed down, but so did the quiet strength of the child he had sworn to protect. He whispered into the darkness, "We're coming for you. We'll end this nightmare." And with that promise, he prepared for the battle looming on the horizon. A fight not just for survival, but for justice, redemption, and the fragile light of hope shining through the darkest woods. Under the shroud of night, the forest lay cloaked in darkness, broken only by the faint flicker of distant campfires and the occasional glint of moonlight on wet leaves. Jack Carr moved quietly beside Mara Ellis, their footsteps muffled by a thick carpet of pine needles as they positioned themselves along a narrow ridge overlooking the traffickers' hidden waypoint. The air was heavy with anticipation, charged by the knowledge that the next hours could shift the tide in a battle fought in shadows. Jack's military training sharpened his focus. Every muscle tensed, every sense heightened. Beside him, Mara's steady presence anchored the moment, her ranger's instincts attuned to the subtle whispers of the wilderness. Below them, the traffickers' camp sprawled across a clearing, dimly lit by small fires that cast flickering shadows on rough tarps and scattered supplies. Vehicles marked only by the absence of insignia were parked in tight formation, engines silent but ready. The men moved with practiced efficiency, their faces obscured by scarves and hoods, voices low and clipped. Jack adjusted his gear with quiet precision, checking his weapon and reviewing the plan etched in his mind. The FBI teams, coordinated by Agent Lena Thorne, were positioned along surrounding trails and access points, ready to converge simultaneously. The goal was clear: to disrupt the traffickers' operation, rescue any victims, and dismantle the network hiding in the forest's depths. "Ready?" Mara's whisper cut through the night. Jack nodded. "Let's make this count." They descended from the ridge, navigating the underbrush with practiced stealth. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual chorus of nocturnal life subdued beneath the weight of impending conflict. Every step brought them closer to the heart of darkness, a place where fear and cruelty had taken root. As they neared the perimeter, Jack spotted a guard pacing near the edge of the camp, his silhouette outlined against the firelight. The man's weapon was slung casually, but his gaze was sharp, sweeping the tree line with suspicion. Jack signaled Mara, and together they slipped into the shadows, moving out of sight before the guard could sound the alarm. The coordinated strike began with a sudden burst of radio chatter, the forest erupting into controlled chaos as FBI agents and rangers moved in from multiple directions. Flashlights pierced the darkness, their beams cutting through the smoke and shadows to reveal startled traffickers scrambling for cover. Jack took point, his tactical training guiding him through the chaos. He moved swiftly between trees, engaging targets only when necessary, each shot precise and deliberate. The baby, Emily, remained safe at the ranger station under medical supervision. But Jack's mind was never far from her fragile presence. The traffickers fought back with desperation, their knowledge of the terrain making them slippery adversaries. But the element of surprise and the coordination of the law enforcement teams began to turn the tide. Men were subdued, weapons confiscated, vehicles secured. Amid the turmoil, Jack spotted a locked enclosure near the center of the camp. Shadows moved behind its bars, captives, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear. With Mara at his side, Jack moved quickly, picking the lock with tools from his kit. The prisoners stumbled out, their relief palpable as they were guided to safety. Agent Thorne appeared nearby, her eyes sharp as she coordinated the extraction. "Great work, Jack. This is bigger than we thought, but we're cutting into their operations." Jack nodded, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "We need to keep pressure on. There's more out there." As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, the camp was secured, traffickers in custody, and victims beginning to receive care. The forest, once a haven for darkness, was now a battleground reclaimed by justice. Back at the ranger station, Jack finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. The weight of the night's events pressed heavily, but so did a flicker of hope. Emily was safe. The first steps toward dismantling the trafficking ring had been taken, and the road ahead, though long and uncertain, was one they would walk together. Jack looked out at the rising sun, its golden light filtering through the pines, and whispered, "This is just the beginning." The early morning sun filtered through the towering pines, casting dappled light across the clearing where the remnants of the traffickers' camp lay in ruin. The forest was quiet now, its usual chorus subdued beneath the weight of recent chaos. Jack Carr moved methodically, his eyes sharp and alert despite the exhaustion that tugged at his limbs. The operation had been fierce, swift, and unforgiving. A battle fought in shadows to reclaim stolen innocence. Survivors huddled nearby, wrapped in blankets and receiving care from a team of medics and counselors. Their eyes held stories of fear and resilience, faces etched with the scars of captivity, but glimmering with newfound hope. Jack's gaze softened as he watched a young woman cradle a small child, the fragile bond a testament to survival. Agent Lena Thorne approached, her expression a mix of relief and determination. "We've secured most of the suspects," she reported, her voice steady. "Local law enforcement is en route to process arrests and evidence." Jack nodded, curtly. "Good. What about the others?" Lena's eyes darkened. "We believe there are still victims out there, hidden in other locations linked to this network. The operation is larger than we initially thought." Jack's jaw clenched, the weight of the mission pressing heavier. "We'll keep pushing." Nearby, Mara Ellis coordinated with park rangers, organizing search parties to comb through the forest's vast expanse. The network's reach had exploited the wilderness isolation, using the terrain as a shield for their crimes. But now, the noose was tightening. Jack's thoughts drifted to Emily, the baby who had sparked this relentless pursuit. She was safe, resting under medical care, a fragile symbol of hope amid darkness. He made his way to the makeshift medical tent, where she lay sleeping, her tiny chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Kneeling beside her, Jack whispered softly, "You're safe now, Emily. We'll find them all, I promise." The day unfolded with a tense urgency. Teams scoured the forest, uncovering hidden camps, abandoned vehicles, and evidence that pieced together the network's operations. Jack worked alongside law enforcement, his military expertise invaluable in navigating the treacherous terrain and anticipating the traffickers' tactics. As afternoon waned, Word came through of a remote cabin discovered deep within the park, a possible holding site. Jack and Mara led a team through dense underbrush and steep slopes, moving swiftly yet cautiously. The air was thick with anticipation and the lingering scent of pine and earth. Reaching the cabin, they found signs of recent occupancy. Discarded clothing, makeshift bedding, and faint footprints leading to a concealed cellar door. Jack's heart quickened. This could be where survivors were held. With careful precision, they forced open the cellar door, descending into the dim space below. The air was stale, heavy with despair, but alive with faint murmurs. Inside, they found several victims, gaunt and frightened, but alive. Relief washed over the group as the captives were escorted to safety, their eyes wide with disbelief and gratitude. Jack's resolve hardened. The fight was far from over, but each rescue was a victory against the darkness. Back at the ranger station, evidence was cataloged and suspects processed. Jack sat with Mara and Agent Thorne, poring over maps and reports, strategizing the next moves. The network was sprawling, but their unity and determination were stronger. "We're closing in," Mara said, her voice steady. "They're running out of places to hide." Jack nodded, fatigue shadowing his features, but resolve burning bright. "We'll dismantle this operation piece by piece. No one else will suffer." As night fell once more over the forest, Jack stood outside, the cool air brushing against his skin. The stars peeked through the canopy, silent witnesses to the battles fought and those yet to come. He thought of Emily, of the survivors rescued, and of those still trapped in shadows. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but Jack Carr was no stranger to the fight. With a steady breath, he whispered into the night, "We're coming for you. We won't stop until every one of you is safe." Weeks had passed since the stormy night when Jack Carr first found Emily abandoned in the wilderness. The relentless search, the high-stakes confrontations, and the rescue missions had culminated in a series of arrests that dismantled the trafficking ring preying on the region. Now, the forest seemed to breathe a quieter breath, the towering pines standing sentinel over a land slowly healing from the shadows. Jack stood outside the rehabilitation center on the outskirts of the small town where Emily was being cared for. The sun bathed the building's weathered facade in warm light, and the distant hum of life carried a promise of renewal. He watched as Emily, now healthy and vibrant, played in a secure garden, her laughter ringing clear and pure like a bell freed from its cage. Beside him, Mara Ellis adjusted her ranger cap, her eyes reflecting the same quiet satisfaction that Jack felt. "She's come a long way," Mara said softly. "From that cold forest to this." Jack nodded, a rare smile breaking through his stoic exterior. "She's a fighter, just like the others we saved." Emily looked up, her dark eyes meeting Jack's with a shy smile. She toddled over, her small hands reaching for his. Jack bent down, lifting her into a gentle embrace. The bond between them was unspoken, but profound, a connection forged in adversity and tempered by hope. Nearby, Agent Lena Thorne approached, clipboard in hand, her expression a mixture of professionalism and warmth. "The federal case is proceeding," she reported. "The traffickers will face justice, and the survivors are receiving the help they need." Jack's gaze shifted to the horizon, where the forest met the sky in a seamless line of green. "It's not just about justice," he said quietly. "It's about rebuilding lives." The three of them stood together, a silent pact forming between soldier, ranger, and agent, each carrying the scars and strength of a battle that had tested their limits. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, Jack found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The memories of storm-soaked nights, desperate searches, and fierce confrontations lingered. But so did the moments of kindness, courage, and unwavering resolve. He looked down at Emily once more, her small fingers entwined with his. "You've given me a new mission," he whispered. "One I'll carry with me always." Mara smiled, her voice steady. "We all have a part to play, and together, we've made a difference." The wind stirred gently, carrying the scent of pine and earth, a reminder that life, like the forest, endures and renews. Jack inhaled, deeply, feeling the weight of the past lift, replaced by a quiet hope for the future. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, he knew that this was not an end, but a beginning. With Emily safe and the traffickers brought to justice, Jack, Mara, and Lena prepared to move forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, bound by trust, loyalty, and the enduring power of compassion. And as they shared a quiet moment beneath the vast sky, Jack whispered once more, a promise carried on the evening breeze. "We'll keep fighting. For her, and for all who need us." The forest around them stood tall and silent, a solemn witness to a story of resilience, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the darkest of nights.